It's now my pleasure and honor, really, to introduce the CEO and founder of Royalty Pharma, Pablo Legorreta, who really needs no introduction, but I'll just say, as one of the person that works every day at Royalty Pharma, that it's really, he is a visionary to us, an inspirer to us, and we're really proud to be part of the team. So it is really a pleasure to introduce a man who has really quietly built one of the most successful companies over the last 15 years, Pablo Legorreta.
Thank you, Jim, for your kind introduction. And I'd like to say that I'm honored to talk to you this morning, and I feel honored and humbled to share the stage with this distinguished guest that we have invited today. And throughout the morning, heard about a lot of really interesting and cool things happening in life sciences. We've also heard about access and cost. And what I'm going to do this morning is finish by talking about funding of innovation and the role that Royalty Pharma plays in funding innovation. And I'll start by asking a simple question. And the question is, who funds innovation in life sciences? Up until 1996, there were three traditional sources of funding. Governments, through various agencies, NIH in the US, Medical Research Council in the UK, and other similar agencies in other developed economies. Companies, both biotech and pharma, and venture capital. Since 1996, we have a new player, which is Royalty Pharma. Now, in trying to talk about the topic of funding innovation, one of the things that myself and the team wanted to get a sense for a few weeks ago when we started to think about this talk is, what is the scale of our contribution to innovation? Can we put some parameters around how much we're contributing to this? And what we found is that we could look at sort of three different parameters, three different things that would give you a sense of the scale. And by no means I'm trying to suggest, to compare ourselves with venture capital, for example. I think at the end we play a very complementary role. I'm not, suggesting that what we do is similar to venture capital, but what we found interesting was to see that when you look at how much we have spent over the last 7 years, which is $5.2 billion, and how much we've spent this year to date, which is $1.6 billion, and then you compare this to the venture capital industry, which has spent $26.3 billion over the last 7 years, and $3.5 billion this year, our contribution over 7 years is about 20% of venture capital. This year, it's risen to about 46% of venture capital. This is because our pace of investments is increasing, whereas venture capital has stayed more or less stable. Then the question becomes, is this a fair comparison? Where is this money going? And when you look at venture capital's money is going to fund startup companies, to furnish labs, and to fund phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials. And then we ask ourselves, can you compare us to venture capital? And what we found is when you look at the deals we're doing, and we're doing a transaction with an academic institution or hospital, the money generally is going to fund buildings, to furnish labs, and to fund basic research that generally doesn't get funded by industry. When we do a transaction with companies, like the transaction we recently did with Astellas, money is generally going to similar purposes, funding labs, furnishing labs, and financing clinical trials. So what we concluded was that it was actually quite similar. We then looked at another parameter, which is how much we're spending per year in average, which is about $1 billion, and how much we've spent this year so far, which is the $1.6 billion figure. And Tufts University has been following healthcare for many years and prepared a study where they looked at how much it costs to bring a drug to market. And their conclusion is that it's about $1 billion, maybe increasing recently. But what we also found interesting is that the level of investment that our business is doing per year is equivalent to about one drug approval. We then looked at big pharma, big biotech, and how much these companies are spending in R&D on a worldwide basis, and tried to see how we compared from a scale perspective to these companies. And what we found was that Royalty Pharma would rank among the top 30 in the world in terms of investment in life sciences. So what we've realized, and it's a humbling realization, is that Royalty Pharma has become a meaningful financial contributor in the funding of innovation. So what I'd like to do now, over the next 15 minutes, is to touch on four topics. One is, who are we? What do we do? How did we get here? And where are we going? So to begin with, who are we? We're a group of highly motivated and energized young professionals. We were born in 1996, September of 1996, and we're pleased to celebrate today our 15th anniversary and share with all of you our vision for the future. And what we've done is that by expanding the traditional parameters and boundaries that define a traditional pharmaceutical company, we have created a global leader in life sciences financing, focused on providing innovation capital to inventors, research institutions, and companies. Our business plan has allowed us to create a rapidly growing company in the life sciences industry. Now, what do? We do not discover, develop, manufacture, or market biopharmaceutical products. Instead, we invest in royalty interests in marketed and late-stage biopharmaceutical products, and we finance late-stage clinical development for royalties. I'm going to explain now a specific example of a transaction we did with a very prominent New York-based research institution to give you a better sense of what happens when we do transactions with institutions and companies. In this particular case, it's Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, where scientists sequenced the DNA of a human protein, GCSF. This is the protein that our bodies naturally use to stimulate white blood cell production, and you have here the crystal structure of the protein. They filed patents, obtained many of them, and then scientists figure out a way of how to produce this human protein by inserting the sequence of the human protein into a cell, a bacteria cell, E. coli, and essentially use E. coli as a factory to produce this human protein in large quantities. An interesting thing to mention is that another institution based in New York, Columbia University, scientists there many years before developed this technology. They figured out how to use cells to manufacture human proteins. They filed patents. This resulted in royalties to Columbia over many years. And it is an invention that has actually created this industry. The biotech industry could count one of among the important technologies that gave rise to this industry, this Columbia invention. Now, coming back to Memorial Sloan Kettering with GCSF, they licensed this invention to Amgen for milestones and royalties. Amgen launched the product in 1991, converted it into a multi-billion-dollar drug used in cancer therapy. Cancer kills white blood cells, but it also kills cancer cells, but it also kills white blood cells. So this drug is used widely in cancer to counter the negative effects of chemotherapy. In 2004, Royalty Pharma and Memorial Sloan Kettering entered into a transaction where they sold us a portion of the royalty for an upfront cash payment and an ownership interest in Royalty Pharma. And since then, Amgen pays royalties to both Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and us. So let's look now at the rationale of why this transaction made sense for them and for us. From our perspective, we made an attractive investment. From Memorial Sloan Kettering's perspective, they had a big problem, which was a huge concentration of risk. This asset had become very valuable, and it was a very significant component of the institution's financial assets. So by monetizing a portion of this asset, they diversified. They also were able to finance a portion of a building, or used a portion of the proceeds to finance a building, which has become a very important research center in New York City. And in addition, by receiving a royalty interest in Royalty Pharma, they converted what was a wasting asset with a finite life into an interest in an ongoing business that will produce dividends and value for Memorial Sloan Kettering for a much longer period of time. The second case that I'd like to cover is a collaboration with a leading pharmaceutical company. And this is a recent transaction we did with Astellas. And what happened here was that Astellas Pharmaceuticals, the second biggest pharmaceutical company in Japan, acquired a New York-based pharmaceutical biotechnology company called OSI Pharmaceuticals. The rationale for the acquisition by Astellas was three things. They wanted an oncology business to expand their oncology presence worldwide. They wanted the pipeline that this company had, and also a US presence, which they lacked. They also got, through this acquisition, patents, licenses, and royalties on some very interesting novel technologies to treat diabetes. But this was a passive financial asset for Astellas, and monetizing this was an important way for them to reduce the cost of the acquisition and free up capital that could be used in other parts of their business to fund their own products. So a few months ago, we entered into a transaction where we actually acquired from Astellas this DPP-4 patent estate, license, and royalties. And as a result of that, today collect royalties on a whole host of diabetes products that have very good growth prospects in the future.